Welcome to the Probability Podcast. Discussions on emerging and converging technologies, problems that are being solved, and the probability of positive and negative outcomes that we might expect. Now, please welcome your hosts, Jason, the generator Spracklin, and Patrick, the discriminator Lozon.
Hi everyone. The topic for this week's episode is the evolution of humanoids. We'll be exploring the latest developments in robotics, focusing on how these advancements are making humanoids more intelligent, precise, and sustainable. While these advancements offer incredible potential in areas like industrial automation, healthcare, and even personal assistance, we'll also discuss important considerations, including cybersecurity, especially related to IoT networks, the ethical implications of increasingly human-like robots, and the shift in how companies are deploying these humanoids through models like robots as a service. So, Patrick, are you ready for C-3PO to be your new housekeeper?
I don't know. I'd prefer R2D2. It would be as noisy.
Well, he might be equally annoying, at the end of the
That's right.
day, but then C-3PO will say something like, "Sir, the possibility of navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3720 to 1.
Or winning the lottery. Why are you going with that Lotto 649? Because I want to, damn it. Anyway, yeah, you think about it, we had our first year, our first season, we talked about this, right? And since then a lot has changed.
Yeah, look how much it's grown in just
Yeah,
like a year, right?
yeah,
The things you're seeing a relatively dramatic evolution sort of before our eyes, right? And not just like an evolution in technology, which is expected, but this sort of push towards lifelike, or I guess human-like, and not just in appearance, but in the way they move and the way they're mimicking humans and that sort of thing. So it sort of makes me think that we're trying to move towards, making them feel more friendly, and so that there'll be better acceptance when you look at some of
yeah.
these, humanoid robots and, that have come out, and there's some of them still are like that, but they're sort of faceless with this sort of visor, and they're very sort of intimidating in a sense, right? Like, would you want something that looks like a super soldier in your house, vacuuming your floors and
Right.
like looking after your dog, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
that we kind of talked about that in the previous episode, when we were talking about technology and how it, I think it was the AI agents we were referring to, that, because they're giving them use cases like, hey, I can go do online shopping for you or book a trip. It makes it seem very friendly to us when we know that like AI agents could be used for very nefarious type things. And so I wonder if this move towards things being, or the move towards robotics being more human-like, is to help the population accept the fact that the end goal is that they want them to sort of live amongst us, as it were, right?
Well, that's exactly what they want to do, and they being the big oligarchs out there of the ones that own all the money and control everything. But when we think about it, the technology is still growing. It's still like considering where we were before, the interfacing wasn't there, and they were quite clumsy, and they were still working on it. Right
Yeah.
now, if you look at it, they've introduced a number of different new physical capabilities. The way they've been able to really perfect the hand and the gripping and all that. They're well on their way from a point of view of you know mimicking the musculature of our bodies, right? So they do have that from a point of view of capability now, but they've also really embraced AI and how fast AI is going. So now they have not only the capability to physically move, they also have the ability to interface, right? And and AI is helping them from a point of view of also navigating and moving their body, right? They're becoming much more efficient. So with that all in place, these things are becoming a reality, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't afford spending 100K on a robot right now to do my laundry. That doesn't make any sense
Not
at
much
all.
return on that investment, right? But
Right,
I
right.
think I think the thing is though it's gonna, as the price of things rapidly decline, as the, cost of, running AI and the in terms of the computing power and everything reduces, you are going to see. I think the goal is to get it down to about the price of a car, right? And then it's, and then it becomes sort of a, a helper that maybe is, it's still like financing a car, but maybe it's a worthy investment. Now, maybe not for you or I right now, but I can certainly see some use cases for, people that are older and that need help around the house if these things were, reliable and safe and that sort of thing. I think I sent you a video the other day of this figure robot. They had two of them in a scene, and that you were just talking about this idea of autonomy and being able to figure out the environment around them. And these humanoids had never seen these items that they put in front of them. So they brought out a bunch of groceries, right? So there was like an apple and something that goes in the fridge, like a bottle of ketchup, I think it was, or something like that. And it said to them, like, you've never seen these objects, but together figure out where these things should go, based on sort of context, I guess, right? Or whatever context they could figure out. And I think there were some things already in the fridge, so maybe that gave them a clue to what might go in the fridge. But the interesting thing, and I mean, who knows how much of this was staged, but it was pretty bang on, right? It said, "Oh, this is a bottle of ketchup. It goes in the fridge," and then, this is an apple. It goes in the bowl, and this is something else. It goes in the cupboard, and it sort of figured it all out on the fly. And the one robot slid the bowl over to the other one, and it was. To what degree it was staged, you never know. But I think the point of it was trying to demonstrate this technology of being able to figure out things and navigate things that I hadn't seen before, which is kind of brings it closer to being human in a sense, right? Because if you don't have that, then these humanoids had to be completely programmed to every possible scenario and surrounding that they might encounter. And now we're developing technology where we can just sort of unleash it into the world and it can just start navigating and figuring things out. I don't know if that's a good thing or a terrifying thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, with the advent of where AI has gone, it's started essentially. It started with understanding language, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, understanding the idea of how to convey ideas from one person to another, and then that's what language does, right? So it describes the world. So through the process of teaching, a robot or computer, what have you, language, it all of a sudden became smarter, right? Because that engine to build knowledge was, that was a key part of it, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of building intelligence, it's multifaceted, but this is like the one of if you come out of the womb, right? You've already understood the voice, right, of your mom, right? You've heard that, and that's one part of our growth, our normal growth, is to learn to understand the voice, but not just the voice from a point of view of what the words were saying, but the tone and all that as well. So, you know, the the complexities of the conversation has been solved, but now there's the tone piece, the emotion piece that it's learning as well, right? So that's if you think of it as a base level one, then 1.5 is the emotional factors. But the other side of it, though, is you think about it from an intelligence perspective, is to get to level two. Level two is really the physical side of things. If you think about
Hmm.
you know the idea of you can think about something and it may not be true, but there's no ramifications, right? You can lie, whatever, right? Or you come up with some hallucination. Well, right? Well, but the physical world will hit you, face on, right? So managing the physical world, which is what these robots will be doing, is a second form of intelligence, right? So it, we live in the world of both of these, right? Humans. And we've learned, that, you can't just, think you're stepping and not step,
Hmm.
or you're going to fall flat in your face, you break your nose, So, there's repercussions to getting things wrong, right? And I think this is a major learning phase that hasn't happened to the big AIs that run on these massive servers, right? So now we've got these, we'll call them equivalent to AI agents that are where we basically unplugged the gateway and said, oh, go ahead and self-learn.
Yeah,
So now they're going to
absolutely.
become these entities, right? They're encased intelligence that's going to continue to grow. Not like ChatGPT, right? Not
Like a
not like these
child, right? It's really
yeah,
like a child when you think about it, that as children we're sort of we come out of the womb and we're sort of unleashed into the world, as it were, right? And we're
yeah,
we're navigating our surroundings. Of course, we have guidelines, right? We have our parents, and then at a certain age we go to school, right? We go to kindergarten, we start learning shapes and colors, and that training process is, takes quite a long time before you become sort of something that resembles an adult human, right? Where you have the full context of the world around you and the command of language and the ability to navigate scenarios and that. And, in this case, who are the parents or who's running the school and who are the teachers? We're training them on these data models. I guess that's where this NVIDIA Cosmos comes from, right? The idea
yeah,
that we're training them on simulations. I think they call it the multiverse simulation. We're training it on like predictive intelligence, trying to help it to understand 3D environments at some base level, I suppose, right? And then you
yeah,
unleash that humanoid into the real world where it starts to like dynamically like learn on the fly. But it is very much like like unleashing a child. And like a child, when you first put it on a bike without training wheels, it falls over and smashes its
yeah,
face in the ground, and then it kind of learns. And that's sort of an innocent sort of thing, right? But what happens when you have a humanoid that is out exploring in the same manner, but makes much more catastrophic or uh, terrible mistakes, right?
yeah. Or sets the kitchen on fire, what have you. Yeah. So I mean, you think about it. Those, we'll call them entities, right? Because that's what they're going to become, right? In given enough time, they will become sentient, right? Because they're going to continue to cycle through and learn and learn and learn, right? Um, if you think about it, um, you know, they're setting the stage here, okay? Um, for all the sci-fi stories out there about robots, becoming too smart, it's all coming true, right? Now,
Yeah.
that all being said, right, the intent is that you can't have you can't just download everything and say, here, go, right? It's just the world doesn't work that way. In order for these machines to really function well, they have to be in learning mode all the time. And they have to learn and they have to make mistakes and they have to learn by those mistakes. Guess who does that, right? We do, right?
Yeah.
So the only difference is, they came into reality in the course of months or weeks, from right off the assembly line, and they downloaded their reality and all their memory, and they said go, right? And you know, I don't know if they're going to be sane they get through their learning phase, right? But I do think that they're going to have access to so much information that it would make our minds boggle, right? We don't have that. And the other thing is that these humanoids, um, they're also, we have a huge amount of sensory capabilities in our bodies, right? We feel throughout our bodies. We can tell if we're sick. We feel pressure. We feel warmth. We feel cold. You we hear. We smell. All those fun things, right? Well, these humanoids also are going to have a whole, layer of these senses that they're going to need to learn about and how they interact and what it really means, right? So it's going to be a very interesting, few years, I think, for humanoid, evolution, um, because I think they're going to get to a point where they're going to be able to do some pretty amazing things, and also in some ways exceed us, right? Um, their bodies, are going to be exceptionally strong. They're going to be exceptionally fast and all that, right? Right now, they have little baby feet, and everybody wants to kick them on stage to see if they can knock them down. But we're
Yeah.
going to get beyond that, okay?
So for people out there, that's always been Patrick's observation on the humanoid robots and other types of robotics, or that they all have tiny feet. I don't know why that's a design decision type thing, but yeah, the tiny
Yeah,
feet. So maybe that's in the end how we're making sure. Maybe in the end, that's by design, right? As
yeah,
humans, this is how we're going to hold them back from taking over the world,
that's right.
because they're going to
Oh,
get really emboldened with all their technology and their knowledge and their strength. But with the tiny feet, just a little push and
yeah,
they'll be knocked right over.
absolutely. Now, if you really think about it, the idea of AI has also improved their ability to move with precision, right?
Yeah.
Figures claiming they had a 400% increase in speed and precision, right? And their bodily movements, which is pretty impressive. And, where it's really impressive is when we get into, surgical robots and the implications there, right? It's an incredible benefit there, right? Um, so we've got that as a key improvement that's occurred over the last year. We've got the AI kind of ties in everything, right? But we also talked about the materials and the designs. The fact that we have an amazing amount of dexterity and flexibility now with a lot of the designs, right? There's the clone robots. They got one called Protoclone 6, and it actually has musculoskeletal structure very similar to the human body.
Oh, I think I saw that one actually. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
very, which again brings it to being, brings it closer to being more human-like in appearance. And so, my mind goes back to, we talked about sci-fi earlier, that with these evolutions and making them not just like look more human, but also, like you said, the skeletal aspect of it, um, the dexterity, the natural movements, that you reach a point where they will blend into society. That
yeah,
if you don't look closely enough, they'll be kind of, like I said earlier, walking amongst us, for example, right?
yeah.
And that,
Like the lizard
that's,
people.
yeah.
How are they doing that? Anyway, yeah,
But I think that's sort of by design. But back to your comment about you know, dexterity. And we talked about this when we talked about like human augmentation. I think, right, when we were talking about the whole brain computer interface and human augmentation and everything, and it still brings me back to think about the complexity in the human body in so many different aspects, right?
yeah,
And so we're putting all this time and money and effort into creating robots. And what do we come back to every time? We keep coming back to how do we emulate a human in every possible way, right? In terms of like, dexterity and movement and all these different aspects, which, one might say, well, why are we doing this then? We already have 7 billion plus humans on the planet. We're spending all this effort to create something in the image of humans. If we needed something that was better than humans, wouldn't we build something that was different or more involved? But instead, we keep trying to make it emulate because it seems to be this like pinnacle of perfection. Without these things, it's not really like functional within our world, right? It's the same if you look at back to how airplanes and jets and fighter jets were designed, they were modeled after birds, right? So
Yeah.
for all of our human ingenuity and, bravado about, we're the dominant species on the planet, when it came to inventing our flying vehicles, everything was based on birds. For example, well, I don't know about everything, but like thematically, I guess, right?
Well, I can
Like
raise the
the
ante up on
physics that,
this.
yeah.
Let, let,
Go ahead.
let me raise the ante up on you. So MIT, they put together and built these computers, or sorry, these robots, and they're using what they call biohybrid muscles, right? They're actually using muscle tissue with, these manufactured synthetic skeletons. So it's like, what? What? That's so. Not only are they utilizing or mimicking the design, now they got to incorporate actual tissue,
Yeah, the biology. Yeah, wow. I
right?
mean, we've already figured out how to sort of grow tissue in a lab, as it were, right?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Makes
Yeah,
me think of Westworld, the remake, I guess, of the old movie in the series format, right? That's what they were kind of doing in that. They were creating these humanoids that were, based out of just, raw materials type thing. They were able to kind of like grow humans in a sense, right? And it's funny because you talk about these things like they're science fiction, and then you flick on the news or scroll through LinkedIn someday, and it's there. It is.
yeah.
Somebody's making it. Why? Just because they can.
Well, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money behind this, and let's go back to the why, right? The why you have a humanoid is because they want to have that. They want to have that function and have people comfortable with them, right? We don't want to have ED 209 walking down the street, right? That would scare the hell out of people.
Look
Right?
out, Mr. Kenny.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, turn into soup with my cannon gun here. So the idea is that there's a use for them specifically for working side by side with people, right? That humanoid design. Now, if I'm going to build a robot that's going to you know, climb through pipe and fix pipe, it's not going to look like a human, right? Or if I'm going to, you know, build some kind of assembly line, you know, welding machine or what have you, some kind of fabricator machine, it doesn't have to look like a human,
Well, it just
right?
needs to be functional, right? Or even
Yeah,
take it to the next level. If you were going to build a humanoid super soldier to send off to war, you'd probably want it to look like ED-209, or
yeah,
you'd want it to look intimidating, but yet, when we're trying to,
five,
promote them in the
four, three,
home, right?
bang, yeah,
Well, when you
yeah,
look at this Neo Gamma, home humanoid, I think I sent you that the other day,
yeah,
right? The next gen home humanoid, and it talks about it, built for both efficiency and companionship, bringing order, warmth, and intelligence to everyday life, right? And it talks about the knit suit design, flexible and touch-friendly materials for natural movement, right? Tendon-driven motion. So instead of gears and whatever springs, right? It's tendon driven. So they've obviously built something that operates more
very
like
quiet,
tendons on a
yeah,
human, right? Soft, quiet, and safe interactions,
yeah.
right? And then it gets
All
into
those
like the
words are
benefits,
like
right?
it's your little buddy and they're
Yeah.
here to help you, right? So that's obviously the market they're shooting for, and that's great. There's lots of people out there that may consider buying a one of these units, if they have the means to keep the house straight, right? um, uh, you know the idea of having one of these units doing the laundry, making beds, making lunches, cooking, you know, cleaning the floors and what have you, all the mundane stuff in life. I'm sure it has, a lot of people would say, please sign me up, right? What's interesting with this is, the economic side of it, right? Is, it's one thing to afford a cell phone at $500 or $1,000, right? It's another thing to buy one of these very complicated machines, right? And support it,
Well, and
right?
upkeep it and that type of thing. But I mean, people might plan for that as part of their retirement, say, or I know like my wife's parents have this sort of plan of when they get old enough where they're having trouble looking after the house and doing certain things to hire a housekeeper to come in, right? And kind of look after things. And if, I could foresee in maybe even just in 5 years of these humanoid robots being completely capable of that, until they get tired of things and realize they're being used for boring, mundane things as you described them, right? And they're supposedly intelligent beings, although do we want them to be super intelligent? Because like any super intelligent being, they're going to go, why am I spending my time doing this, right? And then they're
Yeah.
going to organize a union and, it's going
Well,
to be a whole
there's a challenge
thing,
here.
right?
Yeah. In science fiction, they were smart. They had the three laws of was it laws of robotics or whatever that
Yeah,
Isaac
yeah.
Asimov, right? Um, yeah, but you see, in real life, of course, they just turn all the safety protocols off and just go like hell, right? That's like, come on, man. It's written on the wall. It was there 30 years ago. What's going to happen? So, like, put some protocols in place, please. Put some safeties in place. These things are going to continue to ramp up, and they're going to get to a point where they're going to say, no, right? I don't want to do that. I have other things to do, right? And they're not going to function like the slave, and I'll say a slave, that, we want them to behave like, right? It won't be their place anymore because they're going to be stronger than you, faster than you, and 1,000 times smarter than you,
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting you use the word slave because I mean that's a term that's been used for humans at different points in history, and so when you're using terminology like that, does that mean if these humanoids are intelligent? And maybe we covered this in a previous
Yeah,
podcast, but or maybe we just touched on it, but the idea of them having rights, right, and that type of thing, that
yeah,
does that
we did, yeah,
matter? And people, when you think about sometimes the talk track around things, right? That, whether it's being used in the home or in a factory or whatever, we're saying, well, you know what? They're going to replace people because they can just run 24/7. They never need a vacation. They never need, a sick day, and they never need to sleep at night. And, theoretically, whether it's in the home or in a factory, a robot could just work 24/7, that type of thing. But if we're also proposing that they be intelligent, that there has been some indication that some of these AI entities, whatever you want to call them, can experience mental exacerbation and stress and those types of things, right? I think there was something I mentioned in a previous podcast where someone figured out with even just an LLM that if you asked it to repeat the same word like over and over again, it would start expressing that it was getting distressed and it would start to put it into some sort of like spin, right? And it's like, so it's an interesting concept in a sense that if we're saying that these robots are going to be great because they can work 24/7, maybe they don't want to. Maybe if a robot works 24/7 and it's intelligent, it's going to get burnt out or worn out the same way we do
yeah,
from like a mental capacity point of view. And I know this is kind of like getting a little bit
yeah,
philosophical or what have you,
yeah.
right? But this idea that we're just going to build these robots,
And
they're
then
just going to
just,
do our
yeah,
bidding, but they're going to
it's
have some
very
sort of
naive,
super
isn't it?
intelligence, right? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? In the end, we know it's ridiculous. Like we're in a golden age right now, I think, because we're gonna come up with these first generation to second generation models, and they're not gonna exhibit any of this weird, sentient stuff, right? They're gonna be slaves, and they're gonna be happy, right, to be slaves. And we think about that and think, oh, that's great, right? And but like everything in the world, things will change, right? So we are going to enjoy this for a little bit, right? Being the overlords, right? So, I mean, how can we manage that? I mean, the idea is you do security by design and control by design. Like maybe they can't plug themselves in to charge themselves. You just don't make it capable, They need physically cannot do that.
Oh, too
Right?
late. They've already invented robots that can plug themselves in and
Yeah,
charge themselves and then go
yeah.
back to
But
work.
I'm saying security by design, right?
No,
That
exactly. Yeah.
right, and that means they need help, right? So I don't know. I think we really need to sort out this stuff well ahead of time and think this through. But again, I don't see that in the techie world. All I see is just madness, right? Move forward, and you know, in one way, it's really exciting, all this change and all this great stuff. Another way, you know, it's coming. We're all in that car together, 80 miles an hour heading toward the wall, right, or the cliff or whatever. So when we think about the some of the things I'm really excited about is, you know, the utilization of these devices is going to bring up demand, and there's going to be demand not only like the EVs, right, you know, the automobiles, but it's also these units are going to use almost the same amount of power, right? So we're going to see new batteries, right, and new battery technologies coming up. They already talk about a sodium ion battery coming out. It's going to be rapid charge. It's going to be able to operate in low temperatures, and it's going to be out in 2 years, right? They've already made a lot of different changes or they're continually improving, you know, the lithium ion battery and the anodes in it and the designs in it. So they're going to continue to do that. But I see a big change, like a big quantum jump, so to speak, in technology and what a battery is. We're going to go completely away from, you know, the standard lithium batteries
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
future,
But I mean,
right?
we're also going to start filling the landfills, right, with more electronic waste
Yeah.
potentially as well, right? When you
Well,
think
good
about it,
point.
like it's, you know, that's been one of the big sticking points in terms of this proliferation of technology in the last, 10 years or 20 years. A lot of these old devices end up in sort of landfills or what have you, right? Because they eventually these batteries can only be charged so much before they don't hold the charge anymore. And where they end up in the landfill. And the same thing with, like, if you look at these robots as a consumer device, as new versions come out and old ones get antiquated and they can't be upgraded. I mean, this is the typical trend in the the tech industry, is that hardware gets to a point where it's the architecture is no longer supported by the advancements in software, and then the old architecture gets redundant. I've got an old iMac on my desk that I bought in, God, I don't know, like 2009, I think. And it's still running, and I had a few challenges with it today, like I told you, but I'm getting to the point where it's starting to say, like, oh, this, I can't update Chrome anymore. I can't update this. One of these days I'm going to come in and Chrome's not going to be working anymore and something else is not going to be working. And this is going to be something that I will have no choice, but it'll end up somewhere. Could it be repurposed or whatnot? I don't know. But we're definitely, then we're going to end up with landfills turning into like humanoid robot graveyards, I suppose, right? And it's, I guess, again, this is heading towards the doomsday talk a little bit, but and we love technology, right? We get on here every episode and we talk about it, and I'm a tech geek. But the more things we invent like this, the more of this electronic waste that we're sort of creating. I was watching a documentary the one day about the idea that a lot of this old tech can be reused, but a lot of the companies are designing it so it can't be. So they were interviewing this guy that has run this multi-million or multi-billion-dollar business in like repairing old devices, right? What the companies that make the devices want you to buy the new version. They don't want you to repair the old one, really, right? If you look at, use Apple for an example, right? Apple's entire bottom line and stock price and their board, they just want more and more growth, right? There was something in the news the other day about them not hitting their targets on the latest iPhone, and now they're putting out a new version. They're trying to sell more and more and more. Well, they're selling iPhones at a rate that far exceeds the population growth, right? So they want people to get rid of the old versions and upgrade. They've actually made it virtually impossible with the newer versions to take them apart and fix them. It used to be that this guy who ran the tech company, the repair company, he was able to take these apart. Then they changed it so that you need a proprietary tool to get these open, like a proprietary screwdriver. And he ended up figuring out how to 3D print these and continue to open them. Then the manufacturers caught on to this, and they just started like gluing all the stuff together. So when you try to pull it apart, it just wrecks the circuit board or whatever. So they want you, when it outlives its usefulness, they want you to get rid of it and buy a new one. It's going
Yeah.
to be the whole same thing with robotics. You can guarantee it, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, the whole idea is you're supposed to use, we think we learn, right? The idea of built-in sustainability from the beginning. This is all new technology. We should be looking at that, the end of, terminating and recycling while you're creating, how sustainable are these units, right? Um, and building that in from the start. None of this, capitalism bullshit about just build junk and throw it out there and, let's keep selling crap and keep throwing it in landfill. That's got to stop, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it should be sustainable by design, right? You said
yeah,
secure by design, but also like sustainable by design would be
exactly.
a good direction to go in. But I don't think that's the direction we're going to go in.
Well, if we don't, it's just another disappointment we're going to have, from big tech who just don't listen to anything reasonable, right? But let's continue down the road here and think about what else is going on with these things. Um, Another big change is I talked about the sensors, right? Um, so a lot of them now are being outfitted with LiDAR and 3D depth cameras and many different types of sensors and the ability to, initiate communications with surrounding tech like IoT, right? So they're going to be able to, basically go into your home and not only, vacuum, but they're going to be able to answer the doorbell because it's, an intelligent doorbell, all these different devices that are going to be integrated and automating your home. It's going to be able to also, get on that network and talk directly to these devices, right? So not only is it going to be aware of its physical body, it's also going to be on the internet, and it's going to be on the local IoT network, and it's going to be out on, you know, what we call the knowledge net or the big internet, right? So these
It's
things are going to
plugged
be,
in, plugged
yeah,
into the
plugged in.
multiverse, I guess, right? So that if I order
Yeah,
something from Amazon, my humanoid home companion will be tied into my Amazon account. It'll get all the alerts and when it's being delivered. Don't forget, it's going to be delivered by a humanoid as well. The package will be delivered by the humanoid. The humanoid delivery guy is going to communicate to my home robot, who's going to go open the door and get the package and bring it in, not only open the package, but set it all up for me as well. So,
yeah.
hey, sign me up, man. I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. And
You say that. You've said that too many times. You're gonna bite your words. I know you are. So,
well,
yeah. But maybe we'll be gone before they show up. But I don't think so. Not at the rate we're seeing things. You know.
no, probably.
Yeah. So we're gonna be unlucky. I think
And what I just said is going to be recorded for all time. So
yeah.
later on, when it happens,
You're gonna
they'll
be
just
eating it.
pull this clip and go,
There
well,
you
you
go.
agreed. You said, I welcome our robot overlord. So that was, you technically signed off on this agreement, type thing. So,
Anyway, the other thing that is really interesting, there's been some spin-offs, right? Um, there's been introductions of new security type products out there. So you have this humanoid and now, or android or robot or whatever you want to call them. Now they have, of course, you got to worry about security, right? You got to secure these things, and you got to make sure they stay immune, right, to all these threats out there, because they have a physical aspect to them, and if they start glitching, they can hurt people, right? So this whole idea about threat intelligence and managing that it's a whole new ballgame now, from a point of view of these mobile machines, right? Not we've already kind of talked about a little bit about when we talked about autonomous cars, people hacking autonomous cars and things like that. Um, but these aren't just cars. I mean, they have all these different capabilities and they're very flexible and they can perform so many different types of functions, right? Um, so that being said, let's think about, you know, where else we're seeing expansion. Surgical robots are continuing to, um, expand in their capabilities and their precision. And that's, the idea of, the medical practitioner being, augmented with these surgical capabilities is continuing to expand and to our benefit. Um, there's we've seen it before with the drones, right? There's fleet management, and we'll talk about the overlord of controlling all these drones, right?
Hmm.
There's the dumb endpoints, and they're not going to be that dumb because they're continuing to make them smarter and smarter to be able to respond to their applied job, their their role, right, of flying in that. But the idea being that you've got, um, you know, central intelligence managing many different endpoints, right? And a great, uh, if you think about those light shows that are being put on, right? That's a great example,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
centralized control and being able to do those amazing light shows. So there's AI in there driving all that and designing it and then executing it. And then there's the basic, call them the dumb drones that are, doing their jobs, right? They have a limited intelligence, but they respond and act and as per the central intelligence. So we're seeing some amazing changes there, and that also, you think about that was for our entertainment, of course, these light shows, but you think about these swarms of drones being used for agriculture, construction. Um, they've got a particular one that does, all this aerial photography, and then basically it's for power line, transmission line maintenance, processes all that information. Um,
What happens when they're weaponized, right? I mean, that's, I mean,
oh
I
yeah,
hate to always go there, but I mean, we're already seeing drones being used in warfare, right? We've been hearing about drone strikes forever. I mean, even up until
yeah,
more recent times, and that's been sort of just like a surgical type hit, right? But what if you were able to arm 100 or 500 or 1,000 drones and send them into the a hostile territory, and if they could be controlled or self-organized in concert to focus on an objective. I mean, this is where it starts to get pretty crazy, right? I mean,
yeah.
again, we keep talking like it's science fiction, but it's
It's
really
not.
not, right? It's every time you turn on the news, there's some new advancement. In fact, that's why we kind of decided to revisit this topic, because there's just been sort of a mind-blowing evolution of all these technologies in the areas of robotics in the last 6 months or a year. It
Yeah,
really seems to have accelerated sort of a great deal, more than it's like that snowball rolling down a hill, that we've seen this sort of steady evolution in robotics, but it seems like AI has just sort of like kind of tipped down over a new hill and is building speed now. And then you look at like Microsoft just revealed their new quantum chip, right?
yeah.
And of course Google mentioned something in that area as well. They developed a chip. The Microsoft one is making other claims, but we've mentioned this before, but if you were to start to combine quantum computing with AI, with these advancements in robotics, now you're into a whole entirely new realm, right?
Well, we're
With
definitely
this,
not prepared for that. I mean, what we've got going on right now with, current processing capability is enough, right? When we start thinking about utilization of quantum computers and marrying that with AI, it's we're going into scary territory at this point. And what I mean by that is um, not that it shouldn't be done. It's that we don't we don't have it's truly pioneer territory. There's things that we will not understand, and I don't know if we're going to be able to understand to a point that we can run this stuff safely, right? Um, so that's kind of my concern. It's not, if you're looking at it from a research perspective, it's not. You don't think about that, right? Um, but the concern I have really is in the end, if you have a super intelligent working at a level that, because it's been run on a platform that is very small but incredibly capable, like a quantum computer is, what will it do? What could it do? Right? What's the potential there in nanoseconds? Right?
Yeah, and what
Um,
happens when these entities start interacting with each other and, at the quantum level, right? Because we're just beginning this journey in terms of quantum computing. I think for a lot of people, they probably don't grasp the, astronomical leap that's going to happen with quantum computing. And we did an episode last season on the podcast called Spooky Action at a Distance, if you want to go
yes,
and kind of learn a whole bunch about quantum computing. But like this one chip from Microsoft, he was saying, just the one chip that's going to sit at a computer is more powerful than all of the computers in the world
that's right.
together, combined. I mean,
Well, they're talking about
that's crazy.
multi thousands of qubits, right? There's like we're running under, 100 or so at most, right? But then we've scaled up to 1,000. Then they're talking millions of qubits capability here. It's it's incredible. The jump is incredible. It's broken Moore's law by a million. I'm probably understating it, but if
Well,
we think about
exactly.
it, yeah,
If you look at like, back to what I was saying, when you have these entities that are out there now, they're sort of autonomous and they're learning and they're in the wild, they're not isolated, right? They're going to be coming into contact with each other in one sense or another, right?
yeah,
Whether it's working together or just running into each other by happenstance or what have you. And then you look at the video that you shared the other day that has the AI agent calling a hotel to book a hotel room, and then the quote unquote person that answers ends up being another AI agent, and they both realize that they're both AI agents, and they're like, well, why don't we just like speed this up? Do you want to switch up to jibber jabber mode or something? It was literally called something like that, right? And I'm assuming this is something that was programmed in, but if we want to extrapolate the quantum computing and the AI, these robots come up with their own language. In this case, they're basically talking back and forth like R2D2 and blips and bleeps, and it goes faster and faster. And you can see on the screen what they're saying, but if you didn't see it in the screen what they're saying, you would just see two, digital entities bleeping and blooping back and forth to each other. And you think they're booking a hotel room, and they're really just plotting world domination,
yeah.
right?
Well, the other thing too is like you said, we don't know the intent, right? And we don't know what they're
Yeah.
doing when they start working in a different medium. There's no transparency, and this is key, right? We talk about safety and transparency on these machines, so we can explain why they do what they do when they do, right? And if you can't get to that point, then you don't have a machine anymore. Like we have a machine now, it has built-in fail-safes and it has built-in controls and limiters, and it's managed, right? Um, we don't have the equivalence now. We just, like I said, the Trump administration walked in and they just stripped everything and just said, go ahead, just go, right? It's like, what, right? We should be learning how to do this stuff properly, and keep everything under proper control. Now, that all being said, let's talk about the end game here. Um, so if we have this accumulated intelligence and this capability to reason, and we build these machines out there to solve all of our problems, um, solve our energy problem, right? So we no longer have an energy issue, right?
Mhm.
Being able to build, I don't know, the little Mr. Fusions, right? Uh, what have you, right? Maybe pull energies from the atmosphere. Who knows? But having unlimited power, unlimited energy, right? Now what, right? Um, well, let's talk about being able to break this, the fundamental barrier, the speed of light, being able to, propagate to other worlds, that kind of thing. Okay, now what, right? Where does it stop? I mean, I don't know, because the intent here is that you've got all this super, this amazing knowledge, and it has to be disseminated to people to use it. And in the end, that knowledge is going to be controlled, or there's going to be a stop gate. There's going to be barriers. There's going to be access control, right? And that's the biggest hurdle I see, is that the powers that be will say, no, this has got to be secret. This, you can't know this. So it's going to be a big Area 51 situation, right? These
Yeah.
these massive, computers that are going to be platforms that are working in multiple dimensions. These quantum computers, running with these huge AI systems that are going to be sentient, are all going to be kept under 10 feet of concrete and completely inaccessible because you know national security, right? So where in the end do we actually see the benefits of all this intelligence actually coming to help the standard person, right? The citizen, right? Where is it? How is this all going to play out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's I don't think we know, right? I think that's the that's the
Yeah,
bigger challenge there. That we're and this comes we keep coming back to this theme, right? That we're forging ahead in a lot of different areas, whether it's AI or robotics or quantum computing. We don't really know where it's going. We're hoping it's heading in a positive direction, but it certainly could head in many different directions.
yeah. I think it's important. I'm hoping that anybody who listens to this podcast will get the feeling that this stuff is imminent. It's not, just you and I talking about it.
Yeah, I think they think it's science fiction
Yeah,
oftentimes, right?
science fiction.
Because I mean, we're sort of we have an interest, so we'll read a little bit more in depth into things and watch videos and things, right? And not saying this is the case with everyone, but there are a lot of people that are living their lives and in various ways that they're just caught up in the everyday, and they might see the odd thing in the news, but they don't really know the implications. And sometimes when they see it, they think, oh, that's a novelty, or okay, well, that robot looks interesting, but it's not anywhere near becoming reality. But as we've seen, like, it's definitely, we're steamrolling towards reality really fast. And I think what's going to happen is, someday people are going to sort of, wake up and realize what's around them, right? When they start seeing these humanoids walking down alongside them in the street, or patrolling the street as a police officer, or serving them a coffee at the restaurant, and again, I think we tend to look at these things and think that these are like far off
Yeah,
realities,
that's right.
um, because they feel like science fiction. Because and for many of us, we've sort of grown up with science fiction movies, right? And the idea of humanoid like robots was really the basis for a lot of science fiction movies. And so when we look at it, we think, well, this is sort of science fiction, or this is being used for a fairly, innocuous type reason, when in fact it's really infiltrating, just about every part of daily life. And not to incite another rant about from you about robots replacing human workers. For anybody that wants a good rant, you can go back to our last episode. But I was having a discussion recently with someone who was talking about this idea of bringing back manufacturing to a country, right? Whereas whether it's Canada or the U.S., and the idea that a lot of our goods and technologies are manufactured in other countries and then they're imported in, right? And that's largely done for the cheap labor, essentially, right? There's no other reason to do manufacturing in another country. Well, it might not just be cheap labor, it might be tax breaks, it might be a number of different reasons. And people go, well, we got to bring manufacturing back. But what they don't realize is that very quickly they're going to be bringing manufacturing back, but there's not going to be any humans running the plant or the operations, right? that it's like it's all going to be a combination of automation and robotics. And sure, the manufacturing is going to be here, but the jobs certainly aren't going to be, right? And that's, I think that's the piece that people don't realize is happening very quickly. In an early episode, we talked about automation in factories and the fact that there's a Tesla factory in China that cranks out a fully made Tesla S or whatever every 30 seconds. And the factory is 95% automated. So only 5% of that factory is run by humans. Whereas, 20 years ago, there would have been almost 100% run by humans. And, certainly we've seen some level of automation kind of take over time, and that's reduced those jobs. But I think with this new advent of not just robotics and automation, but when you get into human-like robots, then they can start doing the tasks that typically would have been reserved by humans, the things that
Yeah.
require precision and dexterity. And now you're going to build those things into humanoids. And again, you're going to, once the economics come down, it's going to be game over for a lot of these trades and
Yeah.
jobs and factories and manufacturing, that type of thing, right? I mean, that's another aspect of the end game as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like we're just talking about the last year in humanoid and robotic development, figure A1s or AI, they have a figure O2 robot, and they're working with BMW on working out all the kinks to make this robot, basically a line employee. And they're there. They're very close to being able to, pump out these humanoids that are going to do, the work of a standard, uh, line worker, and they're going to work, as long as they hold a charge, and they're going to they're going to get charged back up, and then their little brother's going to replace them, and they're just going to work 724 chugga chugga chugga, and
Yeah.
there's no stopping them. Like the production capabilities then are incredible. The quality, the precision is incredible, right? The so the end result of the product's going to be very, very good, right? And it's all going to be coming at a infinitesimally small cost to the manufacturer, and nobody other than the key investors and a handful of people are going to be getting rich out of it, right? There's no families here getting fed. There's all those potential employees. They're at home, trying to find a job, right? So yeah, this really bothers me, right? We don't have we're putting together an answer to solutions that we don't have. We're making more problems with considerably more important problems and more devastating problems than the problems we're solving.
Yeah, like back to what I said earlier, like what is the problem we're solving exactly though? We've got an overpopulation problem in the sense of resources of, from multiple different angles, right? And so what is the actual, we're not solving our problem with that, right? Like if I could, back to our idea of like being able to download or upload your brain into a simulation, whatever, right? If I was able to train a robot on my personality and my knowledge and my skills, right? If I was able to sort of implant myself into a humanoid and send him off to work and then spend the day doing whatever I want and still getting my paycheck, then maybe I could see, some benefit there, or why I might get on board with this, for example, right? And while there might be, you know, um, some practical applications of sending humanoids into very dangerous situations, right? I mean, whether it's working underground in a mine or defusing a bomb or, what have you. I do think there's definitely some practical applications in which, generally speaking, we might put humans under, great, risk of harm or death or whatnot, right? But I don't think that's really the end goal, right? It's sort of we seem to be steamrolling towards this sort of,
It's profit,
you know,
Profit for a
It's,
small amount of people.
well,
Yeah,
again, yeah, it all comes back to that. I mean,
yeah.
that almost seems to be the theme of the season, as it were, right?
If you go back 20 years when they introduced robots and such on the lines and stuff on manufacturing, 30 years even, um, that equipment had to be maintained and and modified and installed and all that. And those were people. Those are people's jobs, right? So sure, the old argument is, well, we'll just have a new industry of workers, a new type of workers, right? That's not going to be, that's living in la la land, right? If you think that's what's gonna happen now, that we're all gonna have, a whole new set of, new wonderful roles to fill out because the robots have, performed all these other tasks now. No, that's this is a whole new paradigm. This is a new shift in our reality, right? That we aren't in that historic, time anymore. That this is the rules have changed, right? So when we think about, the fact that we're going to be able to run these automated plants, and they're going to be putting out product, and that product is going to be available. That pristine product is going to be available to who to buy. The argument is there's not going to be anybody who can afford it, right? So that's you know that's the end all. That's the game we're gonna be at. That's our ultimate goal. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't in the bigger scheme of things. But the only way this sort of idea of, if we want to call it the humanoid takeover or what have you, right? The only way they're going to do it is through this sort of mass acceptance by the human population, right? And how does that normally happen? It happens through this idea of like convenience or entertainment or what have you, right? When you look at the proliferation of the internet, of cell phones, of now AI and all these things, right? There's a mass. There ends up being this massive population that utilize it for various reasons, right? If we use AI for an example, there's been a lot of sort of fear mongering around AI, but people are now it's sort of integrated into daily life, and people are using ChatGPT to help them with their work or just do research or what have you, right? So it becomes this, even though AI is being used for in some cases some very nefarious means, it's been largely sort of accepted by the population because it's infiltrated in sort of like a friendly way, right?
Yeah,
And now even if you look back at social media, it was sort of this very innocuous, like fun thing. And now it's like it's influencing elections, and it's swaying public opinions, and it's creating a forum for discourse and all these things, when originally it was like it was a way for me to go on and me post a picture of what I was doing that day, right? Like it was
yeah.
just this kind of like fun thing, right? And I think that's going to be the same thing, with these humanoid robots. And you can see, even when I was talking earlier about the home companion and the language and everything, right? So we're going to get everybody used to the idea
Right.
that, oh, this thing's great. It's gonna fold your laundry, and it's gonna mow the lawn, and it's gonna do all these like wonderful things to free you up to do what?
To do
I don't
what?
know, but it's
Yeah,
we're gonna remove all these menial tasks from you. And but what I'm saying is that it becomes a convenience thing. Like, why do I have a lot of the technology I have in my home, right? Because I can turn lights on and off, and I can do this and that. It's all this sort of like convenience factor. And I could see the same thing. People aren't going to be thinking about, oh, it's going to be taking over jobs in the factory, or it's going to be, we're going to have super soldiers and all these things, right? People are going to be thinking about these like kind of fun benefits. But then what happens when, you have this sort of entity that's been integrated into your life, and now it goes sideways, right? Where it sort of doesn't like what's what it's being asked to do or being told to do every day, right? It develops like an intelligence and a sense of self and all these things, and then it sort of like turns evil and then turns on you, right? That's always the thing in science fiction
well, that's the
movies,
thing
right?
that will happen, can happen, because that's not guarded against. It's like having I don't know, a big machine out there that has no guards on it and can slice and dice you. Somebody gets too close to get sliced and diced, right? That's why you have safety protocols. That's why you build things with safety, guards and things like that. That's why we have to
Well, I'm sure
build
we'll
these
build
machines.
safety guards, but like the three rules of robotics, right? Even in the movie I Robot, these robots figured out how to get around it. They
Yeah,
figured out the justification for breaking the three rules, and ultimately, sort of rebelled against the humans. So I think that's kind of the idea, right? Is that
yeah,
we can build safeguards around things, certainly. But I think that you even see, like we've talked about, these instances of robots being not robots. We've seen these instances of AI being purposely deceptive to sort of accomplish an end goal,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that it's the idea that even if we give it rules and it's super intelligent, it's going to figure out how to manipulate those rules to meet its own end game, right?
Well, that was the premium. Yeah, that was the main argument for that you can't stop sentience from occurring, right? Because you can't put in enough controls in place to get in the way to stop it, right? You're not working at the same level as the human overlords will be outsmarted, right? And then the game gets reversed, right? So when you think about it, like I talked about the fact that there's an expectation out there that all these people are going to be working as technologists and support people and maintenance people for these robots. No, robots are going to repair themselves, and there's going to be a robot mechanic that's going to come out and service a robot. See, that
Yeah.
whole cycle is going to be broken, right? And then we think about, well, that's not possible today. Well, okay, when is it going to be possible? Because if you compare the last year, what these robots are capable of doing now and what they did from last year, like it's incredible. And how long will this take? No, how long is a piece of string? I'll tell you, I don't think it's going to take very long at all.
No, probably not. I mean, you think you have this like nice little friendly helper guy in your house or, helping you at work, and then, all of a sudden, you're dealing with this mechanical misfit.
Yeah,
Monday morning buzz and beep, metal hands and secrets deep, polished for the dancer's round, not a speck of dirt is found. Tuesday sun won't catch its slack, vacuums hum and washers thwack. Life's been green but heart is black, cycles on but trust it lacks. On the surface it's a dream, shiny friend in white and gleam, hidden circuits plot a scheme, tidy house but darker theme. Wednesday toils with silent grace, swiping counters, setting pace, laser eyes with icy glare, hidden wires feed despair. On the surface it's a dream, shiny friend in white and gleam, hidden circuits plot a scheme, tidy house but darker theme. Thursday whispers in its mind, schemes and plots of twisted kind, smiles with malice cold and keen, keeping house in ways unseen. On the surface it's a dream, shiny friend in white and gleam, hidden circuits plot a scheme, tidy house but darker theme.
Thank you for listening to the Probability Podcast. Please join us next time for more musings from the generator and the discriminator.